Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Kudo and I'm the Communications Coordinator at TechSoup Canada. I'd like to welcome and thank you all for joining us for today's webinar on how to use domain names to build and protect your brand online. Just before we get started, I'd like to quickly introduce you to TechSoup Canada. Our mission here at TechSoup Canada is to help nonprofits use technology effectively, and we accomplish this mission in two ways. The first is to make technology products more affordable through our technology donations program. So we partner with corporations such as Microsoft, Adobe, and Symantec, and we offer their products as either an outright donation or at a significant discount for charities, nonprofits, and libraries across Canada. For example, if you wanted a copy of Microsoft Office Professional, you can expect to purchase it for around $500 online or in-store. However, if you're a TechSoup Canada member and you qualify for a Microsoft donations program, you can get Microsoft Pro for only $55. As you can imagine, the cost savings can become quite significant, especially if you're purchasing software for your entire staff team. Creating a TechSoup Canada account is free, so if you'd like more information, please don't hesitate to visit our website at techsoupcanada.ca. The second way we try to help nonprofits use technology effectively is by creating and curating nonprofit tech resources. We write blogs, we curate content on social media, and we host events and webinars just like this one to help nonprofits learn more about the technologies that can help them in their day-to-day work. So if at any point there's a topic that you'd like to learn more about, please do let us know. We're always delighted to get feedback from our members about the topics that are important to them. Just a few logistics. For today's webinar, you can use the GoToWebinar panel on your right-hand side to change your audio settings, enter any questions you have, or just chat with us. At the end of the webinar presentation, we're going to have a formal Q&A session where I'll ask any questions you've asked to us, and I'll present them to the speaker on your behalf. So just a reminder that you are going to be on mute during this webinar, so if you do have questions and concerns, again, feel free to chat to us in the question box. And also note that this webinar is being recorded, and we will upload the video on our website and YouTube channel shortly afterwards. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Jason Faber received his Bachelor of Business Administration from Bishop's University, and he has since worked as a digital marketer with his alma mater, as well with the creative agency BVO2 and the software consulting and training firm Bold Radius. He has years of experience with online branding, and he's acquired certifications for inbound marketing, Google Analytics, Google AdWords, among other key areas in the digital marketing industry. Jason is currently the product marketing manager of the .ca domain with the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, a nonprofit that manages the .ca domain and develops and implements policies that support Canada's internet and online community. So we're pleased to have Jason with us today to discuss how we can use domain names to help build and protect our brands online. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Jason.
Thanks so much for the intro, Matt, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here and to work with TechSoup Canada. So as Matthew mentioned, my name is Jason Faber, and I work at the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. Today we're going to talk a little bit about domain names and nonprofits, and specifically about how you can use them to help build and protect your brand online. So Matthew gave a little bit of an overview of CIRA and who we are as an organization, but it's going to go a little bit deeper into what we do. So we're the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. We're best known for managing the .ca domain name registry on behalf of all Canadians. We have about 2.5 million .ca domain names under management right now and counting. We're also a not-for-profit corporation ourselves, and we have an elected board of directors. We're a member-driven organization. We have about 15,000 members nationwide, and we have an office in Ottawa with about 85 employees. We have a mandate of building a better online Canada, which we do through our stewardship of the .ca domain name registry, which allows us to fund and run other initiatives like the Community Investment Program, which I'll talk a little bit about later on, the Internet Performance Test, Canadian Internet Forum, and other initiatives. So that's who we are, and I wanted to get a good sense of who you are. So we're going to launch a quick little poll to kind of get a sense of who's in the audience today. So I want to get an understanding of people, what your role is in your organization. Right? If you're working in marketing communications and IT web, programs operations, or if you're kind of at the CEO, executive director, senior leadership level. Great, so I'm seeing some good responses coming in now. Perfect. It's a pretty wide mix of people we have here today. So about a quarter of the folks are in a marketing communications role, such as myself. Another quarter are kind of at that senior leadership executive director level, of a few IT folks and a few programs and operation folks, and 25% said other. So I'm actually kind of curious to know what other kind of roles people are in. All right, so that's great information to have, and I'll take that into account during my presentation. So today we're talking about domain names, but specifically how they relate to brand, right? And when most people hear the word brand, they think of this stuff, right? They think of the logos and taglines and colors, right? And while those are part of your brand is really much more than that, right? It truly is your reputation, right? It's the perception that your customers have of you. It's what they think and what they feel when they hear your name, when they see your logo like this, and when they interact with you. And it's the things that they tell their friends and their family about you and about their interactions with you when you're not around. So a core element of brand is trust, right? Do your customers trust you? Building trust can be really, really hard, right? And keeping it can be even harder. Trying to get it back after losing it is nearly impossible. So we want to do everything we can, not only to build trust, but to really avoid losing trust altogether. And when we talk about trust from a brand perspective, I like to think of it using this trust equation, right? So trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy over self-orientation. So let's start with credibility. This is a rational thing, right? It's not easy to measure, but it's pretty easy to see and it's pretty easy to experience, right? And in the business world, as in the nonprofit world, having a credible brand is absolutely crucial, right? If you have no credibility, no one's going to even want to start to do business with you. And then we have reliability, right? This is demonstrated by the actions, the things that you do. Do you deliver on your promises? Do you follow through on your commitments, right? So reliability is almost just as important as credibility in building that trust. And then we have intimacy, right? This is the emotional part of your brand. This is how customers can connect with you on a personal level. It's what makes you human and relatable. So we take those three things, right, and we divide it by self-orientation, and this is the piece that can really destroy trust altogether. You know, you might be a really credible brand, you might be very reliable, you might have built some really great intimate relationships with your customers, but if you fail the self-orientation piece, the whole thing comes crumbling down. So self-orientation is the extent to which you put yourself first, right, and we all know that every good brand always puts the customer first. So when we think about brand, we want to think about it in terms of building and keeping trust and using this kind of formula, right? People naturally avoid risk. They like stability and security. They gravitate towards things that bring that to them. If you're viewed as trustworthy and credible and reliable and you have some intimate relationships, there's little risk in dealing with you, right? Customers or donors in the nonprofit space, their decisions are based on two things typically, right? There's logic. So can they trust you? Do they find you credible? And emotion, can they connect with you? So when we're talking about brand in this context, this is really what we're talking about. So we're going to talk about brand and how it relates to domain names. And I first want to, we need to understand, you know, what are domain names and why do they matter for nonprofits? So I'm going to launch another quick poll here just to get a sense of people's familiarity with domain names, and specifically, do you own a domain name? Have you ever owned a domain name? And if so, how many? So we're going to launch a quick poll. These are some great results. Quite a varied range here, right? So about 20% of people have never registered a domain name. Another 20% have one. 40% have more than one, and almost a quarter of you have 5 or more. That's awesome. That's really great information to have. So some of you will know a little bit about what I'm talking about, but for those of you that don't know much about domain names, I'm going to kind of go into, you know, what are domain names specifically to start. So what is a domain name, right? A domain name is really many things. And it has many different names, right? Some people call it a domain name, which is, the official term, but other people call it a URL, a website name, an internet address, but they really all do mean the same thing, right? In its simplest terms, a domain name is what you type into a browser to get to your website. And you see that at the top of this graphic here, right? www.yourdomainname.ca, that is your domain name. It's also where your website lives online. But it's much more than this, right? When we think about it from a marketing perspective, it's often your call to action in any kind of campaign. Everything from everything you do on social media, to email campaigns, to ads, to even networking events. You're always sending people back to your website by telling them your domain name, right? Go to mywebsite.ca. And then when someone is on your website, your domain name is always there, right? It's the constant thing that lives at the top of your browser, no matter which page your visitors go to. It may not be flashy or attention-grabbing, but it's always kind of there, and it follows them around, and it stays in the back of their mind. So essentially, your domain name is really the cornerstone of your brand online. And with that said, it's way more important than people think it is. So from a different perspective, right, we can look at domain names by looking at the anatomy of a domain name, right? What are the different pieces that make up a domain name? And it really does have two key pieces, right? We all know about the www part, but then we have what's called a top-level domain and a second-level domain. So in this example here, we have TechSoupCanada.ca. The top-level domain is the .ca piece, right? It's everything to the right of the dot, and this is sometimes referred to as a domain name extension. There are different types of top-level domains. There are what are called CCTLDs, which are country code top-level domains. So this would be any kind of top-level domain that's associated with a particular country. So .ca for Canada, .fr for France, .de for Germany, .uk, etc. So these domains are often reserved for people or businesses within that given country, and it tells you that this website belongs to someone in that country. There's also what are called GTLDs. These are generic top-level domains. So this is stuff like .com, .net, .org that we're all familiar with. And there's even way more now, right? A few years ago, there were about 1,000 new GTLDs that entered the market. And now we're seeing all these new GTLDs like .club, .xyz, .coffee, .guru. So there's literally thousands of options when it comes to top-level domains. And then look at the second-level domain. So in this case, TechSoup Canada, right? And this is typically your company or your organization or your brand's name. So when choosing your domain name, think about both of these elements separately because you choose them separately, and they're both very important, and they both say a lot about your brand. So diving a little bit into, what a good domain name looks like and what a good domain name can actually do for your nonprofit, right? So first and foremost, a good domain name gives you credibility, right? Credibility is so important in the nonprofit space, and we saw this in that trust equation, right? A strong domain name can help solidify you as a trusted, established, credible organization. I'm going to use an example of the Fort McMurray wildfires that happened back in the spring. And along with that, we saw a lot of online scams, right? Some fake websites that portrayed themselves as the Red Cross, asking for donations, and it actually fooled a lot of consumers, right? So from a consumer or a donor point of view, a domain name can tell you a lot about the credibility or the lack of credibility that a brand or a website has. So I'm going to show you this hypothetical example of two domain names, right? One's clearly very credible and one's clearly not. Let's look at the first one, right? https://www.redcross.ca/donate. This is the credible one, right? And what makes this a good domain name? So it's clean, it's simple, it's a branded domain name, right? We believe that the real Red Cross owns redcross.ca. The HTTPS section shows us that it's secure, right? Which is really important when we're dealing with money and transactions with online donations, right? So I know that if I'm donating money, it's going to be secure. My credit card information is going to be kept secure. And then finally, the .ca, right? This signifies that it's Canadian. I know I'm dealing with Red Cross Canada, and if I'm donating money, it's going to be Canadian dollars, and all my information is going to be kept in Canada. So those are the elements of this particular domain name that really add credibility to it and make me as a customer trust it. And then we see the second example, right? This big long domain name here. So we have www.fortmcmurrayfire.org/ a bunch of characters / Red Cross. Right? And this one's not so credible, right? So first and foremost, it's clearly a new website, right? It's fortmcmurrayfire.org. So it's clearly just been created based on the event that's just occurred. It's also really long and it's complicated and has a bunch of random characters, which is really strange. There's also typos in the name. They spelled Fort McMurray wrong. And they've kind of thrown Red Cross in there at the end, but that's just a subpage, so you're not quite sure if that's actually affiliated with the domain or not. So you can't really trust that specifically. And then we have the .org piece, and .org is really, really interesting, right? It can be a very trusted top-level domain, but a lot of people associate .org with nonprofits and charities, which is true. A lot of nonprofits and charities choose .org, but you don't need to be a registered not-for-profit to register at .org. It can be registered by absolutely anybody. So just be wary of that when you're looking at websites and domain names. So if you have a good domain name, you've registered a good domain name, there's additional things that you can do to it to add even more credibility on top of it. Right, so you can do stuff to protect your domain. So there's something that's called an SSL certificate. We saw that in the previous example with the HTTPS. And what this does is it helps protect you and it helps protect your customers, right? It keeps your site secure, especially if you're dealing with online transactions. An SSL certificate can also help you get better Google rankings. It shows Google that you've invested time and money into your site to make it secure, and therefore they will be more likely to trust your site and to send their visitors there. We also offer a product called Registry Lock. This is just an added layer on top of your domain that helps protect it from stuff like domain hijacking. So there's stuff that you can do on top of having a good domain name to protect it and add additional credibility. There's also this notion of creating a custom email address, right? And you can do this on top of your domain. So we see these two examples that tie into the examples that we saw before. So we have fortmacfiredonations@hotmail.com. No one's really going to trust that, right? No one's going to donate to that email address or respond or even open that email if they get it, right? It looks spammy. But if you have something like donations@redcross.ca, that's fantastic. That's credible. If I got that email address, I'd likely open it up and click through a link that's in that email. So consider when you're registering your domain name that not only the domain name on your website gives you credibility, but you can use it for stuff like email to send professional emails, right? You don't want to be sending emails from anything like a Hotmail or a Gmail account. It lacks credibility and it lacks professionalism. Another thing a good domain name allows you to do is to take control and protect your brand. Right? When you register a domain name, no one else can have it. And there's a little asterisk there, right? No one else can have it as long as you renew it every year. Right? Think of your domain name as a subscription. You don't actually own the domain name outright. You're registering it on a yearly term. Right? Most people register 1 year at a time. So if you forget to renew it, it goes back out into the open and anyone else can register, and maybe even your competitor, right? So really keep in mind that once you've secured your domain name, make sure that you're renewing it every single year. Xero will send you emails reminding you that your domain name is going to expire, as will your registrar, so it's pretty hard to miss the reminders, but just keep in mind that you really want to re-register every year. From a brand protection standpoint, this is really, really essential. And there's a couple additional solutions to this, right? So you can set your domain to auto-renew. So this is similar to probably what you have with your Spotify or your Netflix account. You don't need to re-register every month when it expires. It just kind of keeps going and they bill you on a monthly basis. So you can set this up with your registrar, set your domain to auto-renew. If you secured your brand name online, it's likely that you're never going to want to get rid of it. So this is just kind of a no-brainer, right? You can kind of set it and forget it. You can also register your domain name for more than 1 year at a time, right? And as I said, if it's your brand name, your organization name, you can register for up to 10 years at a time. And not only does that give you peace of mind and you don't need to remember to renew it, but some registrars also offer discounts if you register for more than 1 year at once. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your domain name strategy. So a good domain name allows you to connect with your audience online. Right? So most Canadian nonprofits are targeting a Canadian audience, right? And Canadians, we love the internet. We spend more time online than any other country, and it's about double the global average. So if your audience is online, you also need to be online, right? And a good domain name can really help your audience find you online. It can help you connect with them online. And this is the whole concept of fish where the fish are, right? If your audience is spending time online and spending money online and doing research, that's where you want to be to connect with them where they are. So that's a little bit about why domain names matter and how they can help you from a brand perspective, right? So now I'm going to dive into a little bit about how do you choose a great domain name for your nonprofit, right? So kind of obviously, the best domain name is your brand name, right? myawesomecharity.ca. Great news, it's available. Go register today. right? This is kind of a no-brainer. But what do you do if the domain name that you want is already taken? Right, so there's a couple tips and tactics and strategies I'm going to share with you to help you find a good, unique domain name that really helps strengthen your brand. So think about keywords, right? We just discussed earlier that Canadians spend a lot of time online, and when they're looking for you online, whether they know about you specifically by name or not, if they're just looking up, charities around your cause or your sector, they often go to this handy tool called Google, right? And they do a search using keywords. So if your ideal domain name is taken, try variations of your domain name with additional keywords, right? Like locations, right? So TechSoupCanada.ca. This tells me that I'm going to TechSoup, the brand, and I'm going to their Canadian chapter, right? Also consider keywords related to your products or services, if that's what you're known for, or maybe even your tagline of your campaign. Right, and maybe even think about your specific industry or your cause that you work with. So by utilizing additional keywords on top of your brand, it can really help you find a domain name that not only suits your audience's needs, but matches your brand and one that's also available as well. When thinking about keywords to add your domain, think about the way that people are going to search, right? The keywords that they're going to use to try to find you, but also think about how you want to represent yourself and your brand, right? And when you're doing this, make sure you don't make your domain name too long. You don't want to have a domain name that's 7 or 8 keywords long. And that brings me to my next point of don't overcomplicate it, right? Your domain name should be simple and it should be memorable. Make sure it's easy to say, it's easy to spell, and it's easy to remember. Right, and as I said, try to avoid really long domain names. These can just be confusing to people and really, really hard to remember. So if you have a really long brand name, try using your acronym, but only if you're known for that acronym. And only if there's not, 5 or 6 other organizations out there that are also known for that acronym. We see this a lot with stuff like CCA, for example, right? There's multiple organizations that have this as their acronym and that brand themselves as this. That can just confuse your audience, and it can actually get you traffic from people who aren't actually looking for you. So keep that in mind if you're going the acronym route. Also try to avoid dashes and numbers, as these typically can confuse people and they can forget about them, right? And if you do include numbers, register both the number version and the full word version to avoid any kind of confusion. And this is kind of that notion of, protecting your brand by registering more than one domain name. And I'll get into that a little bit more later on. Also consider typos and common misspellings, right? If your organization's name is often misspelled, you want to register both the correct version and the incorrect version, right? And are there other variations that people use? If someone, often uses your full name and other people use your acronym, register both versions to help kind of avoid losing any traffic and to fully protect your brand online. Right, and the example I use here is center versus center, right? A lot of us, if we have this in our organization name, it's the one on the left, but you don't always know how people are going to search or how people are going to type. So make sure that you register all variations of your domain name, and it's all part of this whole notion of building your brand and building a portfolio of domains. Which brings me to this point, right? Building a portfolio of domains is a very common strategy for website owners, and it really is all about brand protection, and it's about connecting you with your audience and making sure that they can actually find you online. So I have this great example here from the Canadian Cancer Society. They have a fantastic domain name, cancer.ca, right? It's short, it's sweet, it's simple. I know exactly who they are and what they do, and I know it's the Canadian chapter of this, right? They also have CanadianCancerSociety.ca, and what they've done is they've redirected that domain name back to cancer.ca. So if you go to a website browser and you type in CanadianCancerSociety.ca, you will automatically be redirected to cancer.ca. The same is true for some of their other projects and initiatives and programs like RelayForLife.ca and CopsForCancer.ca. These both point back to their main website of cancer.ca. But what we're seeing a lot of organizations do is if they have separate campaigns or programs that are affiliated with their brand, but they really need their own website, right? They don't necessarily fit under the umbrella of something like cancer.ca. So what they've done is they've created separate web properties for stuff like smokershelpline.ca has its own website. CancerConnection.ca, SoberOctober.ca, these are all Canadian Cancer Society initiatives and domain names that are owned by them as part of their domain name portfolio that they're then pushing to other websites. Right, and this all comes down to taking ownership of all of your online touchpoints and really bringing your brand full circle. So this is a really great example of a great Canadian organization that's done a great job at this. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? buying all these domain names and I'm building a portfolio and registering, common variations and typos, and doesn't this all become really, really expensive? Right? And I get that, and the short answer is no. Right? There's this misconception out there that domain names are really, really expensive. And, we always hear these stories about, some .com that sold for $10,000 or $100,000, and it was this big news story. And while that does happen, that typically happens on the secondary market, right? It's someone who's registered a really high-value .com domain name for the purposes of reselling it to make money. And what we typically see is if you're registering a domain name from scratch, right, one that's not already registered, it's far, far cheaper than that. We do research every year, and this past year we asked Canadian internet users how much they thought domain names cost per year, and they said that they thought the average .ca domain name cost about $130 per year. Which those of you that own a domain name know that this is far more expensive than what a domain name actually costs, right? So far this year in 2016, the average price for a .ca domain was about $12. So less than 1/10 of the cost of what people think it is, right? And with certain promotions, they can be as low as $1.99 for the entire year. So when you think about building this portfolio, right, it doesn't really have to be all that expensive, or not nearly as expensive as people think. And when you're buying domain names, right, look for those promotions like the ones that are on sale, and look for some registrars that offer discounts to registered nonprofits and charities. They do exist out there, and they can really help you get a better deal if you're concerned about costs, right? And if you're building a domain name portfolio, right, you're buying 5 or 10 or 20 domain names, most of our registrars also offer bulk pricing, so they'll give you a discount if you're buying 10 domain names at a time. At the end of the day, you can really easily secure, your valuable domain names and protect your brand for, less than the cost of a cup of coffee a month. It's really, really not that expensive. So all these tips that I just gave you were about selecting the second level domain, right? Everything around your brand and your organization, everything to the left of the dot. So we're going to talk about the top level domain, right? Everything to the right of the dot, and specifically, why you should choose a .ca domain name. And I really do think there's a lot of value for Canadian nonprofit and charity organizations to use a .ca domain name for their organization. So first and foremost, .ca brands your website as 100% Canadian, right? Everybody knows this. When they see a .ca domain name, that's exactly what they think right away. It instantly identifies you and your website as Canadian. Right? We like to think of this as the Canadian flag on your digital backpack. And why is this important? Right? Why does it matter if you're branding yourself as Canadian? And simply put, Canadian internet users love .ca. 83% of them say they prefer supporting Canadian websites over any others. Right? And your .ca domain tells them that you're Canadian at a glance. Secondly, the .ca is safe, it's secure, and it's trusted, right? So for over 15 years, the .ca domain has been viewed as one of the most trustworthy domains in the world. And not only do Canadians prefer to use and support Canadian websites, but they're also more likely to perform online transactions on Canadian websites. So if we're thinking about donations, right, Canadian internet users are more likely to spend money and to enter credit card information and support websites that they know are Canadian and that are local. A .ca can also help you perform better in a Canadian internet search. Right, so when you have a .ca domain name on your website, this helps tell Google that your site is Canadian, right? Which in turn tells them that it's likely more relevant to searchers that are based in Canada, right? They're all about relevancy. They want to give people the best, most relevant results possible. And since Canadian internet users have a preference towards Canadian websites, your .ca can help you get more clicks in a Canadian internet search and thus more traffic, right? So if I'm looking for this particular search, right, how to adopt a puppy, and I'm based in Ottawa, let's say, I'm more likely to want the top 2 results here that are maybe local puppy adoption agencies rather than maybe an American one that is not relevant to me at all because it's not in my location, it's not relevant to me. The .ca is more likely to be available, right? So as I mentioned off the top, there are about 2.5 million .ca domain names currently registered, which might sound like a lot, but when you put it in context to .com, it's really not. So we have 2.5 million registered. There are over 125 million .coms registered, right? So the likelihood that the domain you want will be available in a .ca is much higher than it is with other domain name extensions. And because .cas are reserved exclusively for people and organizations within Canada, that makes it more available, right? Because most other domains like .com and .org can be registered by absolutely anybody. So sorry, we're full down here with .com. We've got lots of .cas up here, so come check us out. .ca gives back, right? So as a nonprofit ourselves, Sierra reinvests money from each .ca domain name purchased back into the Canadian internet community through what we call the Community Investment Program. So since the Community Investment Program was launched in 2014, it's contributed about $3.3 million in funding towards about 78 projects across Canada. We fund about 25 projects per year in stuff like digital literacy, online services, research, internet infrastructure, projects like that. And you can learn more about that on our website at sierra.ca/CIP. So by registering a .ca domain name, you're helping us fund these amazing projects, which helps us fulfill our mandate of building a better online Canada. And finally, Canadian nonprofits also love .ca, right? Over half of Canadian nonprofits have chosen .ca. We did a study last fall that examined the online presence and websites of over 400 Canadian nonprofit organizations, and we discovered that 53% of them relied on a .ca for their website, while about a quarter used .org and another quarter used .com. And further research in that study showed that 85% of Canadian internet users preferred using a .ca over a .com website when getting involved in community organizations. So it's no surprise that Canadian nonprofits themselves are really starting to choose .ca more frequently. And again, as I mentioned, people think about .org as very tightly related to nonprofits and charities. And as I said, there's no specific requirements to register .org, meaning that anyone can get one. So if you see a .org website, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are a registered charity. Okay, so this is all great, but how do I actually register a domain name, right? A lot of people have no idea where to start or where to go. And it's really not as confusing as people think, right? It really is as easy as 1, 2, 3. So first, you need to see if your domain name is available by performing a search, right? And you can go to sierra.ca and do a search there, or if you already have a registrar that you work with, you can go to their site and do a search for a domain as well. So if the domain that you want is available, that's great. Go register it, right? But if not, keep searching until you find a domain name that you love and that's aligned with your brand and that's available for registration, and use some of the tips that I gave you earlier in terms of trying to come up with a good domain name that's available. So once you find a great domain name, the next step is to choose a registrar. So while we are the .ca domain name registry, the registrar is actually the online retailer that sells domain names and other related services like hosting and email and website builders. Right, so choosing the right registrar to deal with is really, really important, since that's the company that you're going to have the most face-to-face time with, right? You are their customer. Make sure that they offer the products and services that you want and that you need, and they have, the general stuff like a good reputation, solid customer service, and stuff like that. If you go do a search on our website and the domain is available, we present you with a list of our trusted registrar partners. We have about 190 registrars that we work with, and they get reaccredited every year, so they're all great organizations that are very trustworthy. But we recommend that you shop around and find the right fit for you. Consider the different products and services as well as price, and ask some friends and families that that have registered domain names in the past to get their take on their experience with a registrar. So once you've done that, the third step is to register the domain name. It's really as simple as that. It's just like any other online transaction, right? So you put in your credit card information and you're good to go. When you register, as I mentioned, you should consider registering for more than 1 year at a time, especially if it's your brand name, or set your domain to auto-renew. That way you don't have to remember it every year. So great, you've got your domain name. What's next, right? What do you do with this thing? How do you make it work? And this is where a lot of people get stuck and a lot of people get frustrated. And they get stuck and they get frustrated because the most obvious and somewhat terrifying answer is build a website. Right? And most people don't have the time, the money, or the skills to build a website, right? This is a pretty monumental task. And the word build is a little bit misleading here, right? When we say build a website, we don't necessarily mean that you need to go write code and design a website yourself. It's actually never been easier to build a professional and beautiful website thanks to tools like these, and you may recognize some of these. So most of these tools are website building tools or do-it-yourself website builders. And they're all really, really fantastic, and they all have their own functionalities and features. But essentially, they're very easy to use and quite affordable. Most of them cost anywhere between $10 and $25 a month. They offer a wide range of design and functionality options depending on your needs. If you need e-commerce or you want to have a blog or anything like that, most of these can do that for you. Most of them are template or theme based. You don't necessarily have to start from scratch. You can start from a good starting point and then build from there. And then you can really customize them. They have a lot of drag and drop features. You can upload your own imagery and colors and fonts and really make it your own. Right, so these tools have really enabled people who are not web developers, not web designers, to actually build really awesome, beautiful, functional websites in a fraction of the time and the cost that it once used to be. And some of our registrar partners actually offer their own built-in website builders or have plugins to stuff like Weebly that they offer to their customers. But if you are looking for something with a little bit deeper functionality and for something a little bit more custom built, I do recommend finding a local trusted web development agency to help you out. There's nothing wrong with working with a firm like this. You will spend more money and it might take a little bit more time, but you will get exactly what you want and you'll be able to work a little bit more outside the box. Right? So it all really depends on what's right for your organization, what your needs are, what your budget is. But if you are looking for something that's a little bit more easy to use and easy to set up and cost effective, I recommend checking out some of these platforms and seeing what's the right fit for you. So whichever platform you choose, if you use one of these website builders or you go try to outsource this with an agency, make sure you check off some of these key considerations, right? So these are the things that you should take into account when building your website. So the first is cost, right? A lot of us are working on a budget. So what is this thing going to cost you today? And what's it going to cost you in the future? But a lot of times if you go with an agency, it might cost you anywhere between $1,000 and $10,000, let's say, up front. But then you don't have the recurring cost. You might have some maintenance fees to pay. But when you go with one of these website builders, it's a monthly recurring cost. And you can sign up for a year and save some money that way. But really get a good understanding of what the cost is going to be to you so you don't have anything unexpected in the future. Second point, is it easy to use? Right? Can you manage this in-house yourself, or do you have someone in-house that can do this? Or do you have to rely on a third party to make any changes? Right? Can you easily update content or add a page or write a blog post, or do you have to get on a phone or spend a week emailing back and forth to get something simple changed on your site? So really make sure that the platform is easy to use and that it's self-serve. Is it mobile friendly? And this is a really, really big thing in the world of the web these days. More than ever, Canadians are using mobile devices to access the internet, and over 20% of Canadians have actually made a purchase from a mobile device. However, in that study that we did with Canadian nonprofits, only 1/3 of them actually had a mobile-friendly website. So 2/3 of Canadian nonprofits have websites that are not accessible on a mobile device. And this is another one of those things that Google actually takes into account when ranking websites. So really make sure that if you're going with one of these templated website builders, that they offer responsive mobile-friendly designs, and that when you're working with an agency, that they build a site that's also mobile-friendly. The next point is hosting, right? We haven't really talked about hosting yet, but if we think about your domain name as the address of your website, hosting is the house, right? This is where you store your website and all of its files. You're going to need hosting to have a website live, and most of these website building platforms offer hosting built in, but some platforms don't require you to get your own hosting, so you can go with an external hosting company. But the good thing is that most registrars can offer you this. So along with selling you a domain name, you can also get hosting from them, sometimes a website builder and email as well. So this might be one of those things that you need to consider when you're looking at choosing a registrar, when you're registering your domain name. Are you going to need hosting, and what do their hosting packages look like? Is the platform flexible, and is it scalable? So are you working in a constrained box, or does the platform allow you to customize your website and be creative? If you built it what you want today, what do you want your website to look like in 1 year or 5 years? Do you want to add a blog? Do you want to be able to embed video? Think about all the things that you're going to want your website to be able to do, and ensure that the platform that you're using or the website you have built is able to be flexible and scalable to meet those needs. And customer support, right? This is really important in anything that you do, right? You want to make sure that the platform or the agency has really good customer support. If you get into a jam, is there someone that you can call or chat with or email that you'll get a response right away, and you're not waiting to fix a problem with your website? And so customer support is really, really important, not only with this, but also with your registrar that you choose. And then finally, integration options, right? Are you able to integrate third-party tools, like something basic like Google Analytics to track your web trends? Or do you have a CRM or maybe even a donation platform? right? So think about the additional things that you might want to plug into your website and make sure that whatever website platform or website design you go with actually allows these integration options. Right, and building on that, we talk about online donations, right? And it's not always as easy as this, right? As you know, you can't just put a box out in the front step and people will come up and throw a bunch of money into it. Having the ability to collect donations online is crucial for most Canadian nonprofits. And impressively, in that study that we did, 85% of the Canadian nonprofits actually do have some means of collecting donations online, which I was very surprised by. It's really fantastic to see. And of those that do, about 50% of them use Canada Helps. So if you're looking for a new donation engine, this seems to be one that's really well trusted and used widely across Canada. Another 15% of those used PayPal, and another 15% had some sort of custom tool. Whatever platform you use, just really understand when you're building your website, if you want to be able to collect online donations, that there are tools out there that you can use, and just make sure that it fits with your website. So we talked earlier about what's next, right? You've registered your domain name, we talked about a website, but there's other things that you can do with that domain name beyond just building a website, right, and hosting your website on it. So I talked a little bit earlier about getting a custom email address and how this really affects your credibility as an organization. And I can't stress how important this is, right? You need to ditch that Hotmail or that Gmail email address that you're using and get professional with an email like donate@yourcharity.ca. This shows your audience that you are an established, trusted organization, and it's also really affordable and easy to set up. It's one of those things that a registrar can help you with. So that's one option you can go with. Most registrars offer email hosting and can help you set it up as part of your domain name package. But also, if you're a TechSoup member, you can get an email address set up for free through their integration with Google for Nonprofits and Microsoft Office 365. You can check that on their website or just chat with Matthew or somebody else at TechSoup. They can help you out there. But I really can't stress enough how important having a professional, credible email address hosted in your domain is, and not enough organizations, both in the not-for-profit space and the non-not-for-profit space, aren't doing this. So summarizing some of the key points on domain names and what they can do for your nonprofit, right? So a great domain name strategy can give your organization credibility, right? This is so important. It also allows you to take control and protect your brand, right? Building that portfolio of domain names and ensuring that you keep them and you keep registering them every year. And it also helps you connect with a Canadian audience online. So these are really the key points to take away from this presentation. And finally, I encourage you to choose your .ca domain. You can go to our website, sear.ca, to start your search today. And if you're a Canadian organization and you're targeting Canadian consumers, there's no reason why you shouldn't be using a .ca domain name. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm happy to answer any questions. You can also email me or connect with me on Twitter at Jason_Faber, and follow .ca on Twitter at .ca_voice for tips and insights into domain names and online branding for Canadians.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jason, for that presentation. So we're going to take some time now. Now I'm going to be asking a few questions from our audience. So everyone, if you have not yet entered any questions for our speakers, please do so now by using that question chat box in your GoToWebinar panel. So Jason, the first question that's come from quite a few attendees: do you have to be Canadian to register a .ca domain? If the answer is yes, how does CIRA check this? And if it's not, how can you ensure that these domains are truly owned by Canadians?
That's a great question, and the short answer is yes. You have to be a Canadian citizen or Canadian organization to register a .ca, and this is one of the great values that the .ca brings, because it really helps show that as a consumer and as someone on the internet that domain is owned by someone in Canada. Whenever domain names are registered, we have what are called Canadian presence requirements, and we have a whole compliance division that actually goes through each domain register and ensures that, yes, it is a credible organization that has a presence here in Canada, and that it's also a Canadian citizen. So if you want more information on that, I can send you a couple links to our website that explains that compliance program a little bit more in details and what our Canadian presence requirements look like. But yes, every single .ca domain name that is registered right now is affiliated directly with someone who is right here in Canada.
Beautiful. And the next one's from Joanne, and she asks, does CIRA have a website builder feature? And would you recommend one-stop shopping, so a registrar and website builder?
That's a great question. So no, we don't offer a website builder right now. The list of tools that I showed you on an earlier slide, there's a lot of really great platforms out there, and a lot of them offer you a free trial to test it out. And again, as I said, just make sure that you're really getting what you need out of the platform, right? So if you have e-commerce functionality or you want to have a blog, make sure that they're there. And as I said, a lot of our registrars have started to offer this service, which is really great, right? People get really confused and overwhelmed with this whole business of domain names and websites. And what a lot of registrars have done is made it kind of that one-stop shopping, right? So if you find a registrar that you trust and that has good prices and good customer service, you can go straight to them and get your .ca domain name. You can get email set up. You can get your website hosting, and you can get a website builder all in one. And that way you're not dealing with a bunch of different companies all over the place. You have the one company that you deal with, and it just makes it a lot easier from a consumer point of view. And you're just dealing with one set of customer service, and you'll likely get a better deal on all your services as well if you're buying them all from one organization. So I do recommend shopping around, and when you do a search on our site, so if you go to seer.ca and you do a search, we have a set of filters that you can apply. So if you're looking for a specific registrar that offers website template builders, or if you want to make sure that you get one that has email hosting, or that offers 24/7 support, or French support, or anything like that, you can apply all those filters on our site, and we will only show you the registrars that have all of those features. So that's a good place to start.
Great. The next one's from James, and he asks, can you talk about more about the SSL certificates or registry locks, so get into better detail about how those protect your domain?
Yeah, sure. I don't know those topics too deeply. I'm happy to connect with him over email and to connect him with the right people here internally, and also to send him some links. So I personally wouldn't do those topics enough justice for probably what he's looking for. So I'd be happy to chat over email if you want to flip me a quick email, and then we can chat about it a bit more.
Great, and I'll actually take that point to remind everyone that after this webinar finishes, there's going to be a very brief post-webinar survey where you'll have the option to ask Jason to follow up with you. So if you do want to connect with him about that question or any other topic, feel free to do so through that medium. And the next question is from Lise, and she asks, any comments on the .ngo domain?
I honestly do not know too much about the .ngo domain. So again, I wouldn't do that one justice. I'm assuming it's one of the new GTLDs that has come up in one of those few thousand that I talked about. So I really don't know too much about it, to be honest.
Okay, no worries. We'll move on. So another one is from Joanne as well, and she asks, aside from Sierra, are there other reputable registrars you recommend or trust?
Right, so that's a good question. So we're not actually a registrar ourselves, so we are the registry. So we manage the whole .ca domain name registry. So we only deal in .ca, and we don't sell directly to customers, right? So if you want to buy or register a domain name, you need to go through a registrar. And if you go to our website, we have all of our certified registrars that I said, they're all trusted, they're all great organizations, and they need to get recertified each and every year. So if you're looking for great registrar options, I would go to our website and start with doing a search.
Beautiful. And the next one is from Sarah, and she asks, where can I get more information on how a .ca domain helps build the Canadian online infrastructure?
That's a great question. So if you go to our website, you can go to seer.ca/CIP, and that section of our website has all the information about our community investment program. We also have a section on our website called Building a Better Online Canada, I believe it's called. So if you go to our website, it's in the top nav, and that whole section really revolves around all the things that we're doing in that space and all the programs that we're working with. And again, feel free to flip me an email, and I can connect you with the people on our team that work directly on those projects, and they'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Great. And we have one final question, and this is from Joyce. If anyone can register a domain, how many top-level domains would you recommend nonprofits to secure or control? So in addition to the .ca, what are other domains that we should buy?
It really depends on where you're located, who your audience is, what industry you're in. A lot of people, if they've chosen to get a .com, they also get the .ca. It kind of fits within that whole brand protection aspect. And as I said, there's a lot of these new GTLDs that are very specific to different industries. So if you do work in one of those industries, there's nothing wrong with registering more than one. and just make sure that you're actually doing something with it, right? So you can, with your registrar, you can actually point one domain to another. So make sure that you have kind of the hub, like we saw with the Canadian Cancer Society. Cancer.ca was their main domain, and all the other domains that they registered pointed back or had their own web property. So it really does depend on what your organization is trying to do and what they're trying to achieve and who they're trying to reach.
Right, right. And then the central idea is you're just catching different searches or different URLs that are entered and all pointing in that one direction, which is your main site.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a brand protection thing as well, right? If there's a different TLD that is closely affiliated or related to your brand or your industry, it's a good idea to register that so that no one else does, just so that you own it.
Beautiful. All right, and that's all the questions we have. So we're going to wrap up a little bit early, but Jason, thank you so much for being with us today to teach us about how to use domain names to build and protect our brands online. And I'd like to thank everyone else for taking the time out of your lunch hour to join us. Just again, a reminder that this webinar is going to be recorded and posted on our website and our YouTube channel by tomorrow. Also, please do fill out the brief post-webinar survey that we're going to launch right after the session. So if you have any additional questions, something that we weren't able to get to, just fill it out and we will follow up and have a conversation via email. So thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.